A low rumble of thunder shook the roof of North Valley Shelter, making the metal cages rattle like old bones. The storm outside was relentless. A sheet of cold rain pounded the windows, seeping the air with the smell of wet concrete and fear. Somewhere in the maze of kennels, a dog howled. It was Odin. He stood alone in his cage at the far end, his black mask pressed against the cold bars, his gold eyes flashing with a haunted vigilance. Lightning lit up the hallway in white bursts, revealing the notched ear and the scars that traced his lean, muscular frame. Tonight, the shelter felt like a forgotten outpost. Most of the staff had already gone home, leaving only the late-shift skeleton crew and the dog's restless dreams. Odin's reputation was well known: aggressive, unadoptable, the words stamped in red across his paperwork. The other dogs shied away from him, sensing something different, something broken but unbending in the way he moved. His tail, thick and heavy, never wagged. Instead, he watched everything: doors, footsteps, every flicker of light, as if waiting for an order that would never come. Down the hall, two staff members whispered. "Don't go near 17, one muttered. "That shepherd's nuts. Did you see what happened last week?" The other, a new hire named Brian, shrugged, a mean smile twisting his mouth. "He just needs to learn who's boss," he said, his voice hard as gravel. The power flickered. Somewhere a fuse buzzed. Brian looked up and rolled his eyes. He stalked to the equipment closet and pulled out a catch pole, the kind used for dangerous dogs. Its steel shaft cold and heavy in his hands. The shelter manager wasn't watching. No one was. Brian marched down the rows of cages. Odin bristled, hackles rising, but made no sound. Brian jammed the catch pole through the bars, jabbing at Odin's neck. "Move, you dumb mutt!" he barked. When Odin didn't react fast enough, Brian slammed the pole into his ribs, over and over, venting his own anger and frustration onto the silent animal. The other dogs howled. Odin, battered, did not bite. He did not snap. He crouched low, ears pinned, trembling, not from rage but from something colder, deeper: submission, carved by memory and discipline. Lightning cracked, painting the cage in violent light. The camera at the end of the hall blinked red, its tiny eye watching, recording, while Brian never noticed. Brian leaned in close, his breath sour. "You're nothing but a problem. You hear me?" he spat, then stormed off, leaving Odin shivering in the corner of his cage, sides heaving with the effort of not fighting back. The storm dragged on. At some point, Odin slumped to the floor, staring at the wall. For a long while, nothing moved but the drip of water and the slow beat of Odin's heart. In the empty quiet, you could almost hear the echo of boots on gravel, a faraway command in a language Odin had not heard in years. He watched the door, waiting as the night dragged him further away from hope. Morning came gray and heavy. Dr. Lily Harrington arrived early, the rain still drumming on her battered army field jacket. She moved quietly through the halls, nodding at the tired staff. A silver locket flashed at her throat, a childhood photo of a dog she once loved, a memory she never left behind. Lily paused at Odin's cage. She was intuitive, always reading beneath the surface, and something about the stillness in the air told her all she needed to know. Odin was curled in a far corner, his eyes vacant, not wild, not angry, just empty, as if he'd given up waiting for anyone to understand. She crouched down, making herself small. Odin looked at her just once. It was enough. Lily saw the trembling in his shoulders, the raw marks blooming across his side. She did not reach for him. Instead, she sat on the wet floor, letting the cold seep through her jeans, and simply watched, silent and steady. Around them, the other dogs barked, but Odin did not move. The shelter manager hurried by, waving a clipboard. "That one's trouble," he said, not meeting Lily's eyes. "Aggressive case, just warning you." Lily nodded, but did not reply. She waited as the morning unfolded. Odin's breathing slowed. At one point, he inched closer to the bars, curiosity warring with caution. Lily saw the glimmer of intelligence in his eyes, a soul battered but unbroken. Brian passed in the hall, glancing at Odin with a sneer. Lily's gaze flickered between them, her instincts prickling. Something was off. She made a note, then lingered long after the others had gone. Outside, the storm faded, leaving the city quiet and washed clean. As the sun finally broke through, Lily stood up. She pressed her hand lightly against the cage, palm open. Odin watched her, silent and wary. In that moment, Lily made a silent promise. To herself, to Odin, and to whatever was watching through the camera's red eye. Tomorrow would bring questions. But tonight, the story was just beginning. The story of a broken dog, a worn-out field jacket, and the long, slow road to something like redemption. Rainwater still ran in rivulets along the shelter's window panes, blurring the world outside into watercolor. Dr. Lily Harrington stood in the staff office, Odin's thick file open across her hands, the paperwork heavy and sharp-edged as a confession. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their glow exposing every red stamp that screamed across the top of each report. Aggressive, unadoptable, dangerous animal, see incident log. But as Lily flipped through the notes, her frown deepened. There were reports of barking, of snarling, of Odin snapping at hands that came at him too fast. But there was not a single documented bite. Not once had Odin ever broken the skin. The language of the notes told a different story: panic from staff, rough hands, fear begetting fear. Lily saw a pattern that others had missed, or chosen to ignore. She reached the incident from last night. Behavioral escalation, refused compliance, physical intervention required. But nothing about the marks Lily had seen blooming fresh along Odin's ribcage. She traced the outline of the bruises in her mind, her own body tensing. The shelter was busy today, voices echoing off concrete. But in Lily's mind, there was only the quiet pulse of something deeply wrong. She closed the file and went to the kennels. Odin sat curled in his cage, staring at the floor. Lily knelt beside him, her battered field jacket brushing the concrete. She spoke softly, just beneath the noise. "I see you, buddy. I see you." Odin flicked an ear, his gaze wary but not wild. Minutes later, Lily found the shelter manager in his cramped office, stacks of paperwork threatening to spill onto the floor. She forced her voice to stay steady. "I need access to last night's security footage," she said. "Something happened in Kennel 17. Odin's showing new bruises." The manager looked surprised, maybe a little defensive. "Are you sure they weren't there before? That dog's always getting himself worked up, throws himself at the walls sometimes." Lily shook her head, her voice sharp. "These are fresh, and the pattern, it doesn't match self-injury." She didn't mention Brian. Not yet. She wanted proof. Reluctantly, the manager unlocked the computer, navigating to the right timestamp. The screen filled with grainy black and white footage, rain lashing the windows, the storm's energy vibrating through the building. Lily watched, heart pounding, as Brian entered the frame, catchpole in hand. She watched the violence unfold, unable to blink. Brian's face twisted with frustration as he jabbed at Odin again and again. The dog's body shrank with every blow, never fighting, never baring his teeth, just trying to make himself small. When Brian leaned in, spitting words at him, Odin didn't even flinch. He'd been here before. It was submission, not aggression, carved by someone else's pain. Lily's hands clenched into fists. When the video ended, her voice was shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, righteous fury. "That's not animal handling. That's abuse. I want him suspended, now, and I want unrestricted access to Odin." The manager's mouth fell open, then closed again. He was silent for a long moment, shame painting his cheeks red. Finally, he nodded. "I'll take care of it. Brian's gone. You can have as much time with Odin as you need." By the time Lily returned to the kennels, news had spread. The staff eyed her warily, as if she had upended some sacred, unspoken rule. Some muttered about meddling, but others looked quietly relieved. The shelter wasn't a bad place, just a tired one, stretched thin, too used to the way things had always been. Lily ignored the whispers. She spent the rest of the afternoon sitting on the cold tile just outside Odin's cage, the file in her lap, reading the reports aloud in a soft, steady voice. She read everything: his intake paperwork, the assessment notes, even the blank pages at the end. Odin didn't move at first, only watched her from the shadowed corner. But as the hours passed, something shifted. Lily could feel it, a subtle loosening in the air, the weight in her own chest easing as Odin's posture changed. When she finished reading, she closed the file and set it gently aside. A long silence. Then, for the first time, Odin stood and padded to the front of the kennel. He stopped, inches from the bars, and simply looked at her. There was a depth in his eyes, a desperate, wordless question, as if he was trying to understand why she wasn't yelling, why her hands were empty, why her voice was soft. Lily didn't reach for him. She just sat, her palms open, her presence unwavering. Outside, the storm faded to a slow drizzle. Inside, the shelter grew quiet. Time stretched. A staff member passed by, watching the two of them, woman and dog, locked in a silent truce. Lily felt her own grief well up, mingling with the animal's pain. She blinked it away, refusing to let Odin see her cry. As dusk fell, Lily whispered, "I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight. Not until you know you're safe." Odin shifted his weight, the muscles beneath his coat quivering. Then, slowly, he lay down just behind the bars, close enough that Lily could see the scars lining his belly, the faded tattoo inked into his ear. She breathed out, feeling the bond forming, fragile as glass but stronger than anything stamped in red. In the office, the manager placed a call, his voice tight with shame. Brian's name was crossed off the shift list. The shelter's routines would never be quite the same. Outside, the last storm clouds peeled away, revealing the first edge of blue sky. Lily stayed until the lights dimmed, then rose stiff and cold, promising herself she'd be back at dawn. Behind her, Odin watched every step, a question in his gaze. What would come next? And would it finally be different? For the next week, time at the shelter shifted into a quiet new rhythm, one dictated by patience, silence, and the slow, cautious growth of trust. Dr. Lily Harrington arrived every morning before the other staff, the Sacramento sky just warming with pale sun, her field jacket dusted with yesterday's rain and hope. Each day she paused by Odin's kennel, never rushing, always waiting for the dog to notice her. She greeted him softly, "Morning, Odin," as if she was speaking to someone who'd survived a war. Odin didn't bark. He didn't snarl. He simply watched her, eyes never leaving her face. The staff learned to give Lily space. Some respected what she was doing, while others rolled their eyes, convinced that even a trauma psychologist wouldn't change a dog like that. But Lily wasn't in a hurry. She'd spent years with people who'd been broken, and she knew that healing was a language spoken in gestures, not words. She started reading aloud from her notebook, choosing passages she thought might comfort. Sometimes she read poetry, soft, soothing lines about rivers and wind. Other days, she read from her old Army field manual, the cadence steady and calming. Odin sat at the far end of the kennel, head low but ears flicking with every word. The first 2 days, there was no change. Odin's tail remained still, his gaze wary. But Lily noticed little shifts, the way he watched her mouth as she read, the way his body leaned ever so slightly toward the sound of her voice. On the third morning, Lily brought a treat, a small homemade biscuit, the kind she'd baked for her childhood dog. She placed it gently on the floor, inches from the bars. Odin eyed it, nose twitching. He looked at Lily, then the treat, then back to Lily. The kennel was silent except for the slow tick of the wall clock. Finally, trembling from head to tail, Odin crept forward and took the biscuit from her open palm. His eyes met hers, wide, uncertain, pleading for understanding. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She didn't move. She didn't try to pet him or praise him. She only let the moment linger, letting Odin set the pace. Something fragile and real settled in the space between them. For the first time in weeks, Lily felt tears threaten. She turned her face away, letting the emotion wash over her, silent and unannounced. It wasn't just Odin's pain she felt. She saw her own scars reflected in his eyes, the exhaustion from years of listening to other people's tragedies, the nights when she wondered if anyone ever truly healed. Sitting there, her knees aching on the concrete, Lily realized she wasn't just rescuing Odin. She was looking for a way back herself. That afternoon, Lily decided to test a theory. She waited until the shelter was quiet, then approached Odin's kennel with a simple whispered command, "Sits." Odin hesitated, then sat, perfectly, precisely, just like a working dog in training. Lily's heart thudded. She tried another, Platz. Again, Odin obeyed, his movements crisp and practiced. It dawned on Lily that Odin's fear wasn't wildness or aggression. It was memory, a trained discipline that had been twisted by pain. She spoke a series of commands in German, her voice soft as a lullaby. Odin responded to each, his gaze flicking to the door, the windows, always scanning for exit points, just as he'd been trained to do. Lily watched him, marveling at the intelligence in his eyes, the way he never lost track of the room, as if expecting an ambush at any second. Later, as thunder rolled low in the distance, the shelter grew quiet. Lily stayed long past her shift, sitting on the floor and reading to Odin, sometimes in English, sometimes in the fragments of German she remembered from her work with military K9s. She brought a pillow and rested her back against the kennel bars. Odin pressed himself as close as he dared, his body curled but his ears alert, listening to every word. Every interaction mattered. Each glance, each hesitant step forward, each pause before accepting a treat. Lily journaled about their progress at night. He listens. He wants to trust, but it's as if he's waiting for the world to end again. What happened to him? Who trained him? And why did they let him go? One morning, Lily arrived early, the sunrise a spill of gold across the shelter yard. She found Odin sleeping at the front of his kennel, nose pressed to the bars, as if guarding the doorway. She didn't disturb him. Instead, she sat and wrote in her notebook, letting her presence speak for her. Odin stirred, then stretched, approaching the bars. For a long moment, dog and human sat together, saying nothing. It was enough. Sometimes in the quiet, Lily heard echoes of her old life. Boots on gravel, the distant boom of helicopters, the broken laughter of soldiers on base. She knew what it meant to carry trauma in your bones, to look fine on the outside while inside you were still bracing for the next bad thing. Odin was the same. A soldier in a dog's body, always on guard, always waiting for orders that never came. The days passed with a strange, peaceful rhythm. Odin's body language softened. His eyes lost some of their glassy terror. He even began to wag his tail just a little when Lily appeared. It was not exuberance, but a tentative hope, an old dog trying to remember what kindness felt like. By the end of the week, Lily felt a bond forming, raw and powerful, rooted in shared pain. She saw in Odin what she needed to see in herself, that it was possible to keep going, to trust again, even after everything. Their silent language was more than enough, and yet, as Lily closed her notebook that Friday night, she knew this was only the beginning. Odin's past was coming for them. She could feel it, just as she could feel her own shadows waiting at the edge of the light. Early morning sunlight streamed in through the dusty glass, tracing pale gold stripes across the kennels. The shelter was quieter these days. There was a strange hush, respectful, maybe a little uneasy, that seemed to follow every step Dr. Lily Harrington took as she moved through the rows of cages toward Odin. Her battered army field jacket was zipped against the chill. She looked determined, as if each morning she left a little more of her own fear behind at the door. Odin waited for her at the front of his kennel, tail still but eyes keen. It was a new habit. He always faced the door now, body angled so he could watch both Lily and whatever came up behind her. Not cowering anymore, guarding. It was a subtle change, but Lily noticed. She always noticed. The last few days had been a lesson in patience and detail. Each time Lily gently brushed Odin's coat, she'd discover another faint scar beneath the fur, another piece of his story hidden in the quiet language of old wounds. She found the tiny inked numbers inside his left ear, barely visible, almost grown over. There was a long, thin line across his belly, a surgical scar that told of something gone wrong and hastily patched. Lily's heart clenched each time her fingers found a ridge beneath the fur. It was while searching for a microchip, something required for every rescue, that she found the space beneath his skin empty. No chip, just a small mark where one had once been. Odin flinched at the touch, but didn't snarl or bite. He simply turned his head and met Lily's gaze, as if asking a question she didn't yet know how to answer. That afternoon, as Odin slept near the front of his kennel, Lily stepped outside into the pale light and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she reached a name she hadn't called in years. Staff Sergeant Mike Harlow, a friend from her days working with military K-9 units at the VA. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She hesitated, then pressed. Mike picked up on the second ring, his voice the same rough growl she remembered. "Lily? That you?" "Yeah, it's me. I need your help," she said, her voice low, the words tumbling out. She described the dog, the tattoo, the scars, the way Odin responded to German commands, and never lost sight of a room's exit. Mike's tone sharpened. "Send me a photo of the tattoo, and Lily, be careful. If he's what I think, there's a story behind those scars." Back inside, Lily knelt by Odin's kennel. She scratched gently behind his ear, whispering, "We're going to figure this out, buddy." Odin closed his eyes, leaning into the touch for a moment. She snapped a quick photo of the tattoo and sent it off to Mike, heart pounding. For the rest of the day, Lily's nerves were taut. She busied herself with paperwork, volunteer orientations, anything to keep from pacing. The shelter was alive with its usual routine: dogs barking, people bustling, the endless drone of phones and the slam of doors. But Lily's mind kept circling back to Odin's scars. Every so often, she glanced down the hall to where Odin dozed in a shaft of sunlight, his body always facing the entrance. At lunch, Mike called back. His voice was tight, serious. "I ran that tattoo through the database. You're not going to believe this. He's not just a working dog. He's registered as Ghost, a military K-9 lost in action in Afghanistan, almost 3 years ago. Nobody's seen him since an explosion at a base outside Kandahar. Handler was reported KIA, dog presumed dead or missing." Lily stared at her phone, breathless. "What? So he survived? How did he end up here?" Mike sighed. "That's the thing, Lily. Sometimes these dogs get lost in the shuffle. Somebody finds them, maybe tries to retrain them, or worse, sells them to security outfits. If he's missing a chip, someone wiped his ID. And those scars, somebody didn't want him found." A chill crept up Lily's spine. She looked at Odin, seeing him anew, not just as a battered rescue, but as a soldier, abandoned by the very people who should have protected him. That evening, Lily stayed late, sitting beside Odin's kennel as the last of the shelter staff trickled out. She read softly, stories of soldiers lost and found, and sometimes just sat in silence. Odin listened, his ears pricking at every word, his gaze never straying far from her face. As the sun dipped low, Lily felt the weight of questions pressing in. Had Odin really lost his handler in the chaos of war? Or was there something darker? Had someone deliberately erased his past? And why, after all that, had he never bitten a soul? For the first time in years, Lily felt the old sense of mission rising in her chest, the urgent need to fight for something or someone who couldn't fight for themselves. She reached through the bars, fingers trembling, and Odin pressed his nose to her palm. In that moment, the shelter faded away, and all that remained was a quiet promise. Whatever his story, Lily wasn't giving up on him. Outside, the Sacramento dusk thickened into night. The world kept spinning, but inside the little shelter, a broken dog and a battle-scarred woman faced the dark together, guarding each other, waiting for the truth. Thunderstorms were rolling in again. The sky over Sacramento darkened, flashes of lightning in the distance etching sharp silver across the clouds. The shelter's dogs, uneasy with the shifting barometric pressure and the low growl of thunder, barked restlessly. But Odin sat quietly, his gaze locked on the horizon beyond the narrow window. Not a hint of fear in his posture, only a soldier's alertness, a focus sharpened by training and memory. Dr. Lily Harrington watched him through the bars, studying his stillness. She'd learned so much about Odin these past weeks. How he guarded the kennel door, how he responded to German commands, how scars and silence were written into his very bones. But tonight, as the rain began to fall in earnest, she saw something new. Odin's entire body went rigid, but he didn't tremble, he didn't cower. Instead, he stood and positioned himself between Lily and the windows, surveying the room with calm, calculated movements. A deep, unspoken bond had taken root between them. But Lily knew Odin was still haunted. She needed to know what shadows shaped his world. That evening, she prepared a quiet test, something she'd learned in her years with K-9 units, a way to reach past language and into the well of memory. She waited until the shelter was closing, the last echoes of conversation fading away, then entered Odin's kennel with slow, deliberate steps. The dog's eyes tracked her, wary but hopeful. She sat on the floor, folding her legs, letting her presence fill the small space with calm. The storm outside built to a crescendo. Thunder rattled the glass. Lily inhaled, let her nerves settle, and then, in a low and steady voice, began to issue commands, first in English, then in German, each word clear and direct. Sitz. Odin sat. Platz. He lay down, watching her every move, waiting for what came next. She tried something more advanced, mimicking the routines she'd seen in the field. Such. Odin's ears pricked forward, and he scanned the room, eyes sharp, body tense, tail lowered but controlled. It was muscle memory, a soldier's response. He was searching for threats, for the invisible dangers that once filled every dark corner of a war zone. Good boy, Lily murmured, her voice soft as velvet. Odin's head turned, and for the first time he seemed to really see her, not as a handler, not as another figure passing through his life, but as someone who understood. She reached into her pocket and offered him a treat, which he took gently, his teeth careful on her palm. Another thunderclap shook the building. The lights flickered. Odin didn't flinch. Instead, he planted himself at Lily's side, standing watch, every muscle humming with the memory of duty. Lily felt a pang deep in her chest, an ache for all the things Odin could not say, for the years lost to fear and pain and confusion. She spoke to him quietly. You're safe, Odin, I promise. Nobody's going to hurt you now. She wondered if he believed her. She wondered if she believed it herself. As the storm raged, Lily let her thoughts drift. She remembered nights overseas, sheltering with soldiers who barely slept, haunted by old explosions and new losses. She saw the same exhaustion in Odin's posture, the way he checked the windows, always keeping one ear tuned for trouble, always half ready to obey or protect or disappear. She wanted to help him let go. But trauma was a knot that couldn't be untied all at once. She could only offer her presence, her patience, and her faith that things could be different. That night, Odin surprised her. As the rain hammered the roof and the wind howled, he circled once, then twice, and finally lowered himself beside her. Slowly, cautiously, he rested his head on her foot. A silent surrender, a moment of trust more precious than anything words could offer. Lily didn't move. She didn't even breathe. She felt the warmth of his head, the slow, heavy exhale that said, for just this moment, he was letting himself rest. Tears prickled her eyes, but she blinked them away, determined not to disturb the fragile peace between them. She stayed long after the shelter had emptied, sitting in the dark with Odin curled at her feet. It was the first time he had chosen closeness, the first time he'd allowed himself to trust someone with his guard down. Lily wrote about it later in her journal. Tonight he gave me a gift, his weight, his trust, his silence. He is grieving, not just afraid. He is looking for someone who won't leave. As she stroked his head, her thoughts returned to the report from Mike Harlow. Odin wasn't just a lost dog, wasn't just a victim of violence. He was a ghost, missing and mourned, carrying the grief of a handler who vanished in chaos and the trauma of being forgotten. Outside, the thunder faded. The world grew quiet. Lily pressed her palm to Odin's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. In that small, dark room, she made another promise: to fight for his peace, to help him recover not just from fear, but from the weight of being left behind. It was a turning point for both of them. From that night on, Odin followed Lily with new focus. His eyes no longer empty, but searching, questioning, hoping. He watched her every move, as if waiting for the next command, or the next chance at trust. And Lily, in her battered field jacket, began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way out of the shadows together. The storm that rattled the shelter that night left more than puddles and a musty dampness in its wake. By morning, word was spreading, fast and vicious, like wildfire on a dry wind. Dr. Lily Harrington arrived at North Valley to find 2 TV vans parked outside the gate, reporters huddled under umbrellas. Someone had leaked security footage of Brian's abuse. The images, grainy, heartless, hit local news before sunrise, splashed across Sacramento's screens, and then blasted out on social media. Public outrage swelled like a tide. Inside, the shelter was chaos. Phones rang off the hook. Staff huddled in anxious circles. The manager's door slammed repeatedly. Some volunteers, shocked and embarrassed, avoided Lily's eyes. Others found quiet corners to offer her gratitude. A nod, a muttered "thank you," as they filled bowls and swept floors. But not everyone was on her side. "She's making us look bad," hissed one senior tech, arms folded. "What if we lose funding? People already think we're monsters." "Someone had to say something," muttered a younger staffer, watching Lily through the glass with something like hope. Odin, for his part, seemed unchanged. He greeted Lily at the kennel door with a deep, steady stare, tail unmoved, waiting. She knelt, reaching through the bars, and felt his nose press firmly into her palm. For the first time there was a flicker of calm, not trust exactly, but a sense that maybe, just maybe, he was no longer alone in his battle. Lily wanted nothing more than to shut the world out and keep working with Odin, to ignore the swirl of blame and praise. But the fallout was just beginning. That afternoon, 2 animal control officers in crisp uniforms arrived, files in hand. They spoke with the shelter manager, voices low and urgent, then turned to Lily. The older one, stern, gray at the temples, held up Odin's file. "We're here to collect evidence. That includes Odin. He'll need to be held in city custody until the investigation's over." Lily felt a sick lurch in her gut. "He's not evidence," she protested, her voice trembling with anger. "He's a trauma survivor. If you pull him out now, he'll lose everything he's worked for. Let me foster him here. I'll take full responsibility." The officers exchanged glances. The senior one shook his head. "Ma'am, we have protocols. After what happened, we can't take chances. The press is watching." "I know," Lily said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But you're asking to re-traumatize a dog who's only just begun to heal. That's not justice." She stood her ground, refusing to let them move Odin. She insisted they read her clinical notes, showed them the video of Odin responding to commands, the way he trusted her enough to rest at her feet. Finally, after hours of tense negotiation, the officers relented. "He stays for now. But if there's any sign of aggression, any slip, he's gone." The stress pressed in from all sides. Lily's email overflowed with messages, some supportive, some furious, many demanding answers she didn't have. The shelter director called her into his office. His voice was tired, his face lined. "You're making waves, Lily. You did the right thing, but we're exposed. Be careful." Lily knew what he meant. Whistleblowers rarely kept their jobs, not for long. She kept her head down and focused on Odin. She worked with him every day. Long walks at dawn, careful training in the yard, quiet moments when all he needed was someone to sit with him and say nothing at all. She watched his body relax, his gaze soften. But she also noticed the way staff watched her now, some with suspicion, some with new respect. The ground beneath her feet was shifting. Then came the revelation she hadn't expected. A staff member, quiet, nervous, looking over his shoulder, slipped Lily a folder late one night. "You didn't hear this from me," he whispered. Inside were photocopies of payment records and security logs. Lily's heart pounded as she read them. Brian, the abusive tech, hadn't just snapped out of frustration. He'd been paid off, discreetly, by a private security contractor. The company specialized in rehabilitating aggressive dogs for resale as guard animals, often for illegal operations. They'd targeted Odin, labeling him high value for his advanced training, then bribed staff to break him until he was compliant. Fury and dread twisted through Lily. She saw the pattern now. Odin's wounds, the erased microchip, the dog's uncanny obedience to military cues. Someone had tried to erase his past, and nearly his future, too. The next day, Lily met with the director and handed over the evidence. He read the documents in silence, then looked up, his expression haunted. "We'll go to the police," he promised. "But you realize, this could shut us down." Lily nodded. "Then let it. If this is who we are, we shouldn't exist at all." Word spread quickly. The shelter launched an internal investigation. The city sent inspectors. The press demanded interviews. Lily stood at the center of the storm, exhausted but unflinching, always returning to Odin's side when the noise got too loud. And in the eye of the chaos, she made a silent vow. She would protect Odin at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing her career, her reputation, everything. That night, as Odin curled at her feet, Lily whispered, "You survived a war, and you survived them. I swear you're never going back, not as a weapon, not for anyone's profit." For the first time, Odin's tail thumped once, slow and heavy, a battered soldier's salute to a promise that finally felt real. Sacramento's air hung heavy with late summer heat as news of the shelter scandal made its way through city channels and beyond. Odin, now a kind of local legend, had grown calmer but remained deeply alert, shadowing Dr. Lily Harrington's movements, following her voice, always vigilant. Lily, exhausted but resolute, spent every free moment with him. Her own reputation teetered. Some hailed her as a hero, others called her a troublemaker. None of that mattered compared to the loyalty in Odin's eyes. Late one morning, as the shelter buzzed with investigators and city officials, a call came from the military K-9 unit in Monterey. Sergeant Michael Yates had seen a news report about a dog with a notched ear and an old tattoo, and reached out, his voice rough and trembling. I think that's my dog," he said, barely louder than a whisper. Within 24 hours, Michael arrived at North Valley Shelter. Lily waited outside the intake door, her heart hammering. The sergeant was older than the photos Lily had seen, his hair peppered with gray, a limp in his gait. His eyes, shadowed, cautious, searched the grounds like a man returning to a battlefield. He wore civilian clothes, but every movement still echoed discipline. Inside, Odin paced. He sniffed the air, tail rigid, a low whine slipping from his throat. Lily knelt by the kennel. "It's okay, Odin," she said. "Someone's here to see you." Michael entered the room, his face drawn, hands shaking. "Ghost," he whispered, using the name Odin once bore, The sound of it snapped through Odin like a live wire. He stood frozen, ears pinned, eyes flicking from Michael to Lily. For a moment, the dog seemed paralyzed by memories, caught between then and now. Michael's voice broke as he knelt, ignoring the ache in his leg. "I thought you were gone. I thought you died in that blast." Odin's body trembled, torn by recognition and uncertainty. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped forward, nose twitching, then stopped just short of Michael's outstretched hand. The sergeant swallowed hard. "It's me, buddy. It's okay." He looked at Lily, grief etched deep into his features. After the explosion, everything was chaos. They said he was lost. I never forgave myself for leaving him. Lily felt her own scars twinge at Michael's words. She knew all too well the weight of survivor's guilt. The reunion was not a Hollywood miracle. Odin approached, hesitant, sniffed Michael's fingers. He pressed his head briefly into the man's hand, then backed away, returning to Lily's side, his eyes searching hers for reassurance. The moment was heartbreakingly human, a dog torn between the world he once belonged to and the world that had kept him alive when all else failed. The shelter director arrived, files in hand, and introduced Michael as Odin's original handler. Officially, the military still claimed ownership, given Odin's status as a K-9 veteran. But Michael shook his head. "I don't want to take him unless it's his choice. He's earned that much, at least." As they spoke, an investigator entered, holding the results of the city's inquiry. The truth was now out. Brian, the disgraced shelter tech, had been working with a local security contractor specializing in the black market trade of military and unadoptable dogs. Odin, Ghost, had been stolen after the explosion, trafficked for months, and only ended up in Sacramento because he'd escaped a transport. He'd survived, barely, because he'd never lost the discipline drilled into him by Michael and his training team. Lily felt anger burn in her chest, but Michael only looked tired. "I can't fix what happened," he said, "but I can try to make it right." That afternoon, Michael stayed at the shelter, sitting quietly with Lily and Odin. He told stories of dusty Afghan mornings, long patrols, the time Ghost had found an IED that saved a platoon. His words carried the ache of memory and the warmth of pride. Odin listened, at first from across the room, then inching closer with every story, his ears pricking at familiar names and commands. As the day faded into evening, Lily watched the tension bleed slowly from Odin's frame. He shifted, pressed his body alongside her leg, but he never took his eyes off Michael. There was love there. Love shaped by pain, time, and the impossibility of going back. When the shelter closed for the night, Michael stood in the parking lot, hands in his pockets. "He's different," he said softly. "You've done something I never could. You gave him a second life." Lily smiled, weary but proud. "He saved himself. I just listened." Before Michael left, he knelt one last time, whispering a command in German. Odin obeyed perfectly, but then he looked to Lily, as if asking, "What now?" Michael's eyes shone with tears he didn't try to hide. "We'll let him choose," Michael said. "Whatever happens, I'm grateful. Thank you for giving him a chance when nobody else would." That night, as darkness settled over Sacramento, Lily sat beside Odin in the quiet shelter, her hand resting gently on his head. The world was still full of dangers, old enemies, new challenges, but for the first time she felt hope rising, quiet but certain, as the bond between dog, handler, and healer promised that none of them would ever have to face their ghosts alone again. Sunlight blazed over Sacramento, slicing through the haze that lingered after so many stormy days. North Valley Shelter was no longer just a backdrop for anonymous suffering. It had become the epicenter of a story, one that drew neighbors, news crews, city officials, and a stream of veterans in faded uniforms. All wanted to see the German Shepherd at the center of it all. Odin's case had become a rallying cry for justice and for change. But the future was anything but clear. Official letters arrived. The military K-9 program demanded Odin's return. They argued that a working dog of his caliber, with confirmed trauma and rare training, could still serve the country if rehabilitated. Others advocated for Michael Yates, Odin's handler, to adopt him, a simple solution that would close the file and satisfy most. But Lily wasn't satisfied. Neither, it seemed, was Odin. After days of tense meetings, the shelter board called for a public demonstration. A fair choice, they called it. The event was arranged on a Saturday morning, the shelter's largest yard cleared and roped off. Cameras perched on tripods. The audience included city officials, animal welfare advocates, veterans, shelter staff, and curious neighbors. Even children gathered along the fence, clutching parents' hands. Lily didn't sleep the night before. She knew what this meant for Odin. Another test, another crowd, another chance to be misunderstood. But she also knew it was a moment to rewrite the rules. Not just for him, but for every animal who'd ever been labeled only by their scars. She arrived early, kneeling by Odin's side as volunteers fitted him with a loose lead. Michael stood a few yards away, hands shaking despite the summer heat, his eyes never leaving the dog he'd once called Ghost. Nearby, a military officer waited, formal, clipboard in hand. The demonstration began. The shelter director explained the rules. Odin would be given a choice: return to service, reunite with Michael, or stay with Lily and become the first member of a new therapy program she'd been quietly building. Each would call him, and Odin would decide. The officer stepped forward first. He issued a crisp command in German, clear and authoritative. Odin's ears flicked. For a heartbeat, his body tensed, muscle memory urging him toward duty, toward the order drilled into him by war. But he hesitated, glancing sideways at Michael, then back at Lily. Michael's turn, his voice rough with emotion, called the dog by both names. "Ghost, Odin, come!" There was an ache in the words, a hope laced with heartbreak. Odin looked at him, eyes shining, taking a single step forward. The whole crowd leaned in. Finally, it was Lily's turn. She didn't use a command, didn't call him by rank or title. She crouched, opened her arms, and simply said, "Odin, you're safe. It's your choice now." The moment stretched, electric, silent except for the flutter of flags and the distant bark of another dog. Odin stood perfectly still, his notched ear flickering, eyes darting between the three. All his worlds, the war, the shelter, the healing, collided inside him. For one trembling instant, it seemed he might retreat. Then, with a deep, deliberate breath, Odin turned away from the uniforms and stepped toward Lily. His walk was slow, each footfall weighted with memory, but his gaze was clear and sure. When he reached her, he pressed his head gently into her chest. The yard erupted into applause, but for Odin, there was only the sound of Lily's heartbeat and the certainty of safety. Michael wiped his eyes, smiling through the pain and relief. "That's your answer," he said, voice breaking. The officer saluted, respect tinged with regret, and turned away. The board conferred, the decision now plain for all to see. Odin would stay, not as property, not as evidence, not as a soldier or a tool, but as the first member of Lily's new therapy program, healing leashes. He would live as a companion and a partner, helping others find the hope he had barely clung to himself. The press wanted statements. Lily shook her head. Instead, she led Odin out to the edge of the crowd, into a patch of sun. Michael joined them, kneeling in the grass. Children approached, shy at first, then bold, reaching out gentle hands. Odin met them with patience and curiosity, his body language open, his eyes soft. For the first time, his tail wagged, not in the frantic hope of escape, but in the cautious joy of belonging. Lily felt the weight of the world begin to lift. She glanced at Michael, saw the pride and peace flickering across his face, and knew they had both chosen the right path. Not just for Odin, but for themselves. Later, as the crowd dispersed, the shelter director announced that healing leashes would be the shelter's new mission, pairing dogs like Odin with veterans and survivors. The program would be built on trust, not obedience, on choice, not compulsion. Odin would lead the way. As the sun dipped lower, Odin rested at Lily's feet, content. She ran her fingers through his fur, whispering, "You're free now, Odin. You get to be whoever you want." He glanced up at her, ears perked, and finally, closed his eyes, trusting the peace that had been so hard won. And as dusk settled over Sacramento, hope radiated from the shelter's little yard, spreading out into the world, as one battered dog claimed his future, and a new chapter began. Summer drifted quietly into fall, the rush of news coverage, public protests, and official investigations faded from North Valley Shelter, replaced by a gentler routine. The old chain-link fences were scrubbed and painted. Walls were hung with new signs, healing leashes, where all second chances begin. The place smelled less of bleach and anxiety now, more of cut grass, coffee, and hope. Odin's world had changed, and he had changed with it. Each morning, Dr. Lily Harrington arrived just after sunrise, her boots crunching on gravel, her battered field jacket flapping in the breeze. Odin met her at the gate, no longer behind bars but waiting near the porch, tail lifted in quiet greeting. His body had filled out, his coat shone with health. The haunted look in his eyes had faded, replaced by the focused calm of a dog with purpose. Sometimes, he even smiled, a goofy, tongue-lolling expression that surprised those who'd only known him as a legend of loss. Odin became the first canine therapist in Healing Leashes, Lily's new program for veterans and trauma survivors. The work was slow, patient, and quiet. Every session was tailored to the wounds that didn't show, flashbacks, nightmares, old guilt. Odin's presence was a balm. He understood the rhythm of trauma, the unpredictable spikes, the long, echoing silences, the way pain made you wary of kindness. He moved among the veterans with careful steps, offering his head to a trembling hand, or sitting still beside someone lost in memory. The sessions always began the same way. Lily gathered a group in the shelter's sunroom, a patchwork space of faded couches, beanbags, battered folding chairs. She introduced Odin, explaining that he was once labeled dangerous, that he'd seen the worst in people and survived. "He's not here to judge or to fix you," she told them. "He's here to show that healing is possible, even for those who think they don't deserve it." One day, an older man named Ray, a Marine with shrapnel scars and a smile full of pain, sat stiffly in a corner, refusing to speak. Odin ambled over, dropped a battered tennis ball at Ray's feet, and waited. Ray stared, uncertain. Then, awkwardly, he tossed the ball across the room. Odin fetched it, tail wagging, and returned for more. By the end of the session, Ray was laughing, a raw, rusty sound. "That dog's got more patience than my VA therapist," he joked. For the first time in months, his eyes were alive. Odin's lessons were always wordless. He taught that trust wasn't a switch you could flip, but something built in the space between moments. The steady presence, the willingness to listen, the understanding that scars, on bodies or souls, were not the end of the story. Lily chronicled everything in her journal, sometimes late at night after Odin had curled up by her desk, softly snoring. She wrote, "He was labeled broken, but became the key to healing so many others, just by being given a chance." Every day, she saw echoes of Odin's journey in the veterans around him. The fear, the suspicion, the longing to belong, the courage it took to try again. Michael Yates, Odin's old handler, became a quiet fixture at Healing Leashes. He started as a visitor, then as a mentor for other veterans. He struggled with guilt, over the past, over the choices he'd made, over the years lost. But watching Odin thrive helped him let go. One evening, Michael and Lily sat together on the porch, the air full of cricket song and the soft shuffle of dogs. Michael looked out at Odin playing with a group of children and said, "I used to think redemption was about erasing the past. But maybe it's just about making peace with it and doing some good because of it." Lily smiled. Odin didn't need to be a hero or a soldier or a survivor. He just needed someone to listen and the space to become himself. The community around the shelter slowly shifted, too. People who once crossed the street to avoid the building now lingered at the fence, asking about adoptions, volunteering for shifts, signing up to bring their own scars to the healing circle. Odin's story traveled by word of mouth, an example of how one act of compassion could spark a wave of change. Sometimes, Lily gathered the team for reflection. "Look around," she'd say. "Every scar, every mistake, every lost soul, it all matters. Not because we fix everything, but because we don't give up. Trust isn't given, it's rebuilt, piece by piece." And so, autumn settled in. The leaves in the shelter yard blazed red and gold. Odin led new dogs and veterans on long walks under the trees, never pulling on the leash, always checking to make sure everyone kept up. His eyes, clear, warm, steady, told a story without words, of suffering survived, of trust renewed, of second chances offered and accepted. The truest lesson, Lily knew, was that healing was always slow and always shared. Dignity was restored not through punishment, but through honest reckoning and stubborn compassion. Odin's journey wasn't about erasing what he'd lost. It was about turning pain into purpose and finding family in the unlikeliest places. On the wall of the sunroom hung a simple plaque, newly polished. "He was cast aside, but he showed us the way home." For Lily, for Michael, for every wounded veteran and rescued animal who passed through Healing Leashes, that was enough. Months passed, and North Valley Shelter was almost unrecognizable. Healing Leashes had become more than a program. It was a sanctuary, a community, a new way of imagining second chances. The story of Odin had become legend, but for those who lived it day by day, it was simply life. Redemption wasn't a grand gesture. It was built from ordinary acts of kindness repeated over and over, until hope became habit. On a clear November morning, the entire Healing Leashes community gathered for a celebration in the open field behind the shelter. The air was sharp with the scent of cut grass and wood smoke. Sunlight poured across the yard, glinting off autumn leaves and the silver name tags of dozens of dogs, each one with a story, a past, and a future that was finally their own. Odin led the way. No collar, no leash, just trust. He ran ahead, his notched ear flicking, his black mask bright with joy. Around him, veterans and volunteers laughed, some pushing wheelchairs, others walking slowly on old injuries, children racing after the dogs with shouts and tumbling giggles. Lily Harrington watched, her heart swelling at the sight. Her battered field jacket felt lighter these days, the weight of her own scars balanced by all she'd witnessed and all she'd learned. At the center of the field, a low table was set with mugs of cider, homemade cookies, and a plaque hidden beneath a blue cloth. Michael Yates stood with the other mentors, shoulders straighter, eyes clearer. He and Lily shared a smile, a silent, grateful conversation between survivors. The gathering began with stories. Ray, the Marine who'd once sat silent in the sunroom, spoke first. His voice was rough, but sure. Before Odin, I'd given up on people and dogs both. Now I can't imagine a day without them. The crowd laughed, some wiping their eyes. Children came next, each with a memory of the first day they met Odin. A gentle nudge, a quiet sit, a game of ball that chased away fear. Their words tumbled out in a chorus of wonder and gratitude. Then came the unveiling of the plaque. Lily pulled the cloth away, revealing bold, simple letters. For all who found hope and all who gave it. Beneath, a bronze silhouette of a German shepherd at rest, alert, peaceful, and free. The applause was soft at first, then grew, echoing out over the field. Lily stepped forward, her voice steady. This is for Odin, but also for every animal and every person who thought their story was over. We learned together that dignity isn't given. It's discovered, claimed, and shared. Odin led us here, but the real gift is what we do with the hope he gave us. Michael placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. He taught me that letting go isn't failure. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do, so someone else can become who they're meant to be. Odin lay in the grass, watching, his body relaxed but alert, as if he understood every word. A little girl in a pink jacket nestled beside him, her hand buried in his thick fur. Adults and children gathered around, some sitting, some standing, all quiet as Lily read the last lines from her journal. Healing isn't a finish line. It's a journey. It's saying yes to tomorrow, even when yesterday hurts. It's showing up for each other again and again. Odin showed us that. He turned pain into purpose, loss into legacy. There was a hush, the kind that settles when something important has been said, and everyone feels it in their bones. In that silence, Odin rose, stretched, and padded to the edge of the field. He turned, looking back, beckoning. With laughter and tears, the crowd followed. Dogs and people mingled in the sunlight, old wounds forgotten for a while. There was no ceremony, no music, just the sound of feet and paws in the grass, and the feeling that anything was possible. As dusk crept in, the field glowed gold. Odin trotted at the head of the group, tail lifted, eyes bright. For one last moment, Lily watched the world from his side, knowing this was not an ending, but the opening of something wide and new. Michael walked beside her, arm linked with another veteran, both carried forward by the hope that had once seemed out of reach. At the edge of the clearing, Odin paused, turned, and waited for the others to catch up. No longer a ghost, no longer a weapon, just a dog, loved and loving, leading the way for those who would follow. And as night settled over the field, the message lingered. Redemption is always possible if we choose to believe. For all who found hope and all who gave it, this is only the beginning.